What year were you born in?
1931, 18th of October.
And were you born in Erskineville?
Yeah, I was born in Erskineville. I think I was born in Charles Street, only there for a short time. And that was in Charles Street, Erskineville, Ray Lane. And then we came here. I'm pretty sure it was in the first month or a couple of months I was born. We came to this house here.
In Albert Street?
Yeah, and it was a rented house then. And I've been here ever since.
What are your earliest memories of Erskineville?
The earliest memories mainly was that the local people, the McFarlanes and the Forrest and those type of people, mainly, most of our life was spent in the backyard here, in this little, well, you haven't seen it, but it's a small backyard. And you never wandered out of that far. You were kept in the backyard, and there were 9 children.
In your family?
Yeah, 4 boys and 5 boys and 4 girls. And
what number were you?
I was I was about the 4th oldest, yeah. And but mainly all the activity in the house, or in those times, which would have been before the 19 or in that 30s, would have been spent mainly in the house and in the backyard. You went to school and that, but mainly you just came back here.
And why was that?
Well, because people never moved far. I mean, there wasn't the mobility that you've got today. People used to go to school of a morning, you'd come back home, you'd only be in these districts. You had just, every area had their own school. You talk about facilities, they had better facilities then than they've got today. I mean, you never had kindergartens, or that we knew them as, and most of the children were all home, and their mothers were home waiting for them.
And you didn't play in the street with other kids, other children from the neighbourhood?
Well, mainly because we had such a big family, and we were always encouraged to run home.
Are you encouraged to bring friends home?
Well, oh yeah, well we always had people. In fact, this place here, I wouldn't estimate how many people would have been through this in my lifetime, because my mother always had the idea that we, well, you know, because it wasn't an easy time. People didn't have a lot. And so, you know, there's not the freedom now you see where kids go to people's place and open the fridge and have a drink. Well, none of that existed. And people were very formal and very proper. And you did go and ask your mother, could you go down and play with the kids in their backyard? But mainly, we were all expected to come home here. And then mostly kids would come here. You know, we call them kids. I don't know whether that's being discriminatory these days. But they used to come back here in the afternoons and that. But people were very, very, very much to themselves. They were private people. I mean, you had friends and that. But to bring them home was something, you know. But in the afternoon, we were expected to be here and stay here. And when I mean, people didn't have, there wasn't lots of places to go. You weren't going anywhere. It's not like today where kids just can go almost anywhere. They've only got to walk out. But you were kept around the house, mainly.
Were there a lot of kids in the neighbourhood?
Oh, there were heaps of kids, because if you look at this house had 9 children when you come to look at it. And when you come to look over, most of these houses here would have had 4 or 5 people in it. They had an old grandma in there, probably sometimes a grandfather. Sometimes there was, this was in the 30s, they had a grandmother, a grandfather, probably had a couple of grown men, like the boys and that, who were working, probably weren't married because that was the Depression time. And I can't remember the Depression, even though I was born in those years. I've never really experienced it because we spent our life here. But my father's family, they lived down in George Street, and her husband took off to the country to try and to make a living, because there was no money here and no jobs here. So they went on that business of going through the country, picking up whatever they could as a living, and they had to keep moving to be able to pick up their dole and their food supplies and that. And yet my father was still here. His father went off, and that meant, this is what, I don't want to get into it, but that's what, women were the bosses. This is what amazes me about all this talk about the influence of women. Women were the major people of authority. And of that period, if you go back to 1938, Vera Roach, there's heaps of Lillian Fowler, all those women were really very, very strong women, because the husbands, from the time of the Depression, either were out walking, looking for jobs, they were not home because they had to travel country or anywhere. And some of them just used to travel the route, because if you travelled it, you could pick up food in various places and you could be fed. Well, you were one, you didn't have to worry about them, they kept alive. In the meantime, they had a job. Sometimes there wasn't much job, they just kept travelling. And but the men were always working, and my father, well, he worked at the brick pits, and he was considered employed because he worked, I think, 1 week in 3. So he couldn't get any help, and there was no help along. But everyone was poor, and these houses over the road here, the two-storey places, they were just empty, open for anyone. All the lead was taken out of the roofs and sold and that. So that was in that Depression time, and I never remembered a lot because I was a young kid. And we had a railway bloke next door who had a big family. They were a typical railway family. They were pretty poor. We were all poor. I don't think there was anyone bloody rich. And I know they weren't rich, but no, people didn't have money. And but somehow, you had some. I don't know how the women did it.
Were most families big?
I'm sorry?
Were most families large, like
yours? Oh
yours?
yeah, well there were always families. It was important for families. I mean, they were. There were always 3 or 4 kids in a family. I mean, they might have been the exception, but they were large families. Well, I mean, we weren't considered abnormal. In another 20 years, or even today, considered abnormal to have a family that size. But in those days, they were big families. And as I say, geographically, they never moved far. Well, but where were they going? There wasn't anywhere they could go. I mean, you've got mobility today, but they didn't, whatever mobility, and they had a lot of good services. They had a tram that used to run across the front here, past my place, and you had a train which ran at the back, and you had a train there. Well, where were you going? You needed money to go. You might have needed a penny or tuppence, but you didn't have tuppence to go. But I didn't remember, mainly it's just what I knew. I never ever experienced that. My sister Maureen says she can remember the matter of money. I never experienced the matter of money. I went to school, I know you had to pay your fees, and some children couldn't pay their fees.
Was that a state school or a Catholic school?
No, a Catholic school.
No.
And, we were looked after. We spent up till the 1940s, and I don't remember much before that. I must have been pretty dull. But my father, I mean, he worked in the brick pits, and fortunately he was a bit of a gambler, and he liked to, he did gamble, and I think we were lucky because of that. He wasn't a bad gambler, and so some way that supplemented to a great degree. And they're all his brothers at one time. I don't know whether this is all his brothers. His brother, he had Phil, Patrick. Well, that's another. Phil, Patrick, Nell, Cassie. There would have been 8 or 9 in that family. Now, I never ever knew his father because he was one of the ones that took off and went mining, but you never seen them again because they just didn't, sometimes they never came back to families, you know. I don't even know how he died. And my mother's...
Did he leave in the Depression?
Yeah, all through the Depression, yeah, all through the Depression. And my mother's father, he worked on the down there at the rocks, Argyle Cut and all that. He was working there. He was a miner who had come from the country. Originally they had come out of the country and they'd come to Sydney here. And he was a miner, very, well, he had some experience. I think he got locked up because of the Orange Day parade. He demonstrated and the police grabbed him and locked him up for the day. Great disgrace to the family. We never ever, I don't think anyone's ever said that.
And when was that?
Hmm?
This is your mother's father?
Yeah.
Your grandfather?
Yeah,
When did
my grandfather, but I wouldn't know much about him. And I hate to tell you, some families might know, but I always maintained most of the people were secretive about their relations. And I'll probably get murdered, but we never, you never asked your parents, you never asked your grandparents their age, you never asked them, they were a stern lot of people in lots of ways. I mean, you didn't have a lot to do with them. And, but they were really stern. I think it could have changed, it might have just been our family. But they were terrific. Well, I can't ever... My grandmother who was, oh, a real short little lady, very Catholic, unbelievable, went to church every morning to Mass and read all the family. There's no way you could swear. I mean, you get away... I never knew the word bloody till, oh, I don't know. I think I even tremble now when I'm in the house and if I say it, because my mother used to get upset. But in those days, I think it was the women mainly. They were the big impression. With Mrs. McFarlane, who had a hell of a lot of children, but tremendous people, big people. You know, not big in size, but big influence. They were respected. They were known, and I don't know, but. Some of the women got a rough turn. It was an amazing thing. The women, like the husbands, would drink, and there was a lot of drinking those days. My father never drank. I think he liked to have a whiskey towards the end of his life, but he never drank as a young man. And but there was plenty of drinking on, all the drinkers, and there was always the arguments, and it was a very shocking thing. If any of the ladies or women were, you know, they would get a belt and you'd know they'd get a belt. And things like that. For no reason, I don't think. They couldn't have been doing too much wrong. You know what I mean? But always in my lifetime here, and that's why I can never understand when people start to tell me years ago about women. And I thought to myself, buck me dead, where's all this starting? Women have always been important. And as I said, Lillian Fowler, she went into federal parliament, into state parliament or federal parliament. I don't know which now, but she's got 3 parks named after her. There's a park down in Angel Street. She lived there, and Vera Roach was one of the really remarkable women. She worked for the public servants, and her car, when they used to say, if Vera Roach murmurs, Joe Carl speaks. And she was that strong. And even the park up the top here, is named after a Labor lady, you know. And my grandmother was one of the ones that started the Labor League. There was an absence of men in those areas in those times because they wandered. And a lot of them walked out. I wouldn't want to say, I never thought of it till now. They might have walked off and left their responsibilities like the people did today. But I don't think so. I think there was really a genuine problem of not having jobs and wandering. And that's why so many of those men did wander and did cover so much of New South Wales. And some of them went overseas.
And did your father's father, he went off in the Depression in the country. Did he come back?
I never ever remember him. I can't ever remember him. Can't ever remember his funeral.
So he didn't come back?
No, well, not that I know. There used to be a photograph. You only had a photograph and you lived in awe. You never asked questions to your parents. My mother was almost secretive about the parents. And I'm not saying there was any great secret to hide. I think that's how they were. I've got an old photograph somewhere that shows you, and that's about, they had photographs. But you remember, you'd go into a place, it was full of photographs. They've all disappeared. If you wanted to know who that was or who that wasn't, there was no names on the back, and they were only known to the people, who when they passed on, everyone chucked them out. You know, it was a shame, really. It was a bloody real disaster. And, no, well, that's how I, and the earlier things is that, as I said, my sister's got a different view. I've got two sisters, I've got four sisters, and the two earlier sisters, two have a different view. One has the lace curtain view, the Irish view, the lace curtain Irish, and the other one has the real grim view, and she reckons she remembers. But my other sister Pat, who's younger, she said, oh no, I never remember that.
Well, tell us what this lace curtain view is.
I'm sorry?
What's the lace curtain view? Tell what does...
The lace curtain view was that everything was lovely and Erskineville was almost Hurstville when you said it, you know, if you said it fast. And she was a lovely person on that, but Erskineville was slums. They were the slums. They were known as slums, and, you know, I suppose a lot of people didn't identify them. And it's amazing that they're slums, but the houses that you see today in the great majority are the ones that were still standing. And I don't know why. I think it was just that, and it couldn't have been because it was a pocket of unemployment, because everyone was unemployed. So it wasn't just here. You could go out a bit and it was still unemployed. You could go to Tom Ugley's Bridge, where I had an uncle who lived on the first house that's still there, on that side, on the right-hand side coming back into Sydney. He was sitting, we used to sit there, and he lived there. And his wife's family owned all that land that started at the end of Tom Ugley's and went back that way for, it must have been hundreds and hundreds of acres. And they lost all that because they couldn't pay the rates. They lost a lot. And in later years, Big Jack we used to call him, he was only a very short bloke, but they used to have the co-op, all the people up there, because they had the land, they had their gardens and everything, and he used to come down here during the bad times, and he'd have a bag of vegetables and all the things that went with it, and sometimes my father would have something to swap. But my father was considered pretty well off because he worked that one day, 1 week in 4. And he used to ride a bike from here to Auburn to go and do his work there.
Did he, which brick pits? Do you mean the one at the state brick pits?
Yeah, the state, he worked at Homebush, yeah, Homebush. He used to work there.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know how long he worked there, but he got a job and it was a big thing of his life, you know.
He worked there most of his life?
I'm sorry?
Did he work
No,
there?
well, he left there around about the 90s. He left there when the Daily Mirror started. That was around about 1940. And someone spoke for him. I know the driver of Ezra Norton, who Norton was the fellow that started the Daily Mirror. And he was a friend, a local bloke that came here, and he got arranged for my father to have an interview with Norton. And it was always important because Norton ran the Daily Mirror and the Truth. And my father went there and then worked for something like 30 or 40 years. And we retired him early in life because he didn't go back 10 years, 15 years. People weren't getting out of the workforce. So my eldest brother held a meeting of all the boys, and they just decided that he wasn't going to go to work anymore. And so we were blessed in the fact that he spent the last part of his life in a pretty happy way. He was very happy to go swimming and go to the races and do all the things he wanted to.
And did the family support him?
Well, yeah, well, he had money himself too. He was a good gambler. Yeah, my mother said not always, so, you know. But no, they were good days, you know. And when you went to school, I mean, mainly, I must have been a bit dull because, quite frankly, I can't remember a lot about school. I only know I'm hopeless. I was never any bloody good. And I never liked it.
What kind of a kid were you?
Hmm?
What kind of a kid were you?
Me?
Yes.
Always a loner, I think, even in a family of 8 or 9. But we used to sit out the back. There was a shed out the back, a big shed. And we'd sit up the back and play on the railway line, which runs right at the back. And we'd always get a belting. Everyone got a belting. You'd get a belting every couple of days because you were up on the railway line when the trains were running through, you know.
What did you do up there?
Hmm?
What did you do on the railway line?
Oh, throw rocks over the other side to the other side of Watkin Street there, or do anything, you know, because it was really exciting running along there, and you know. You go and have a look at it now, it's a mess, but...
Did you have any close calls with the trains?
No, I don't think. We wouldn't have been able to afford to bury ourselves anyway. That's what my mother used to say, we can't bury you, so if you go, I'll put you in the flower pot. So, I don't know whether anyone went in there either.
Did you? Did you ever play chicken with the trains? Did you stand there to see how long? No,
I don't think we were that bloody silly. But we used to be on, you know, how kids would run across the railway line. We used to dare to run across. But we were always pretty smart, I mean. Gee, you wouldn't take a risk, I don't think. I never did anyway. I was always too careful. My brothers were. Jack, he passed on last year. Terrific bloke, good bloke. Yeah.
So how did your family survive with your father and, you know, with 9 kids and your father working one day and 3?
I'll let my sister tell you that. That's my sister 1 or 2. My sister Pat will tell you a different version, and my sister Maureen will tell you another version.
Be interesting.
She would be. You ought to talk to Maureen.
Yeah.
Whatever happens, you talk to Maureen.
Well, what sort of a man was your father? How would you describe him?
He was a great bloke, terrific bloke. My mother was I always think my mother was the authority in this house. She was the boss. And this is why I can't understand people trying to tell me about women. They were the supreme. She had control of this house and she ran it. And of an evening, my mother worked here all her life. I don't know what she did, but she worked here all her life in this house, and it was absolutely spotless. That's why I don't believe in reincarnation. Because if there was reincarnation, or she could get a pass off God, she'd be back here and kicking my backside like nothing because of the state of this place. Now, but my father was a terrific bloke. He loved sport, he loved swimming, and he liked to gamble, and he was a gambler. He came from brothers that were all similar, and he loved the children. As soon as they could walk, or as soon as they could go, well, that's why you should talk to my sister, Maureen. He would grab her and take her out to the beach, and they would swim all day. She'd go out for, there were no problem. And Maureen was his favourite anyway, but then later on, he was a tremendous bloke. Loved kids, and later on in life, he helped all the younger sets. We were all in the younger set, and that, I was on the fringe. All I ever did was read, and so I never really mixed in. But the house was always full of people from Erskineville, the Erskineville Catholic School, and they had cricket, football, everything imaginable they took part in. And then they used to call back here of a night time, some of the blokes, Teddy Butcher, Johnny Peterson, all those crowds, and we'd sit there just arguing over nothing, and or playing cards or talking, and they were good blokes. They were terrific. Later on in life, when things become very, well, not prosperous, but they were well off, some of the boys went to South Australia and West Australia on trips with my mother. When my father died, which was sad, we weren't sad about it because everything had been done for him. He just came in and lay down, he died, and it wasn't really sad because he'd had a terrific life, considering the earlier days, and then when he finished up. But he had a terrific life. We used to call him the king. There's a photograph of him somewhere sitting out in the backyard. And of course we're all boys, and some of the boys weren't very tall, but they were pretty solid blokes. And part of our problem was that he fell over in the yard, and of course all these blokes raced out. They were in here, and they were friends, all raced out to pick him up. And you think that was a good thing, but it did him damage, because when they picked him up, it punctured his lungs, and he carried on for a fair while after, but it was the start of a problem, And but he was a top bloke, a real top bloke, and one part of it too, like he had a job. He always worked because he had that 1 week, and then he did have a job when things picked up. He then worked, and he liked to go to the races, but he was a gambler that would wait 2 or 3 weeks to have a bet. In other words, he'd pick out his horse and he'd wait. He wasn't like me. I like to bet every day, and it doesn't matter. I'll have a bet just because there's a race. But my father, he would have to pick a horse out and go out and bet, and he was very good when he did that. And but he was really a top bloke, and everyone loved him. All the kids loved him. My mother idolised him, and if we got into trouble during the day, my mother used to say, "Well, when your father comes home, I'm going to tell him, and you're going to get a belting." But sometimes she would take it into her head that she was going to do the discipline, see? And we used to say, "Can we wait till Dad comes home?" Because we always knew he'd take a very benign view of it all, and but he'd give you a lecture, and I think he was loved because he never had to exercise any authority, and he was always good, and he loved to give kids. He bought me a pony. I had a pony bought for me. I went in the 8-hour-a-day parade. It was a lot of money. It was when Anthony Horton's was actually as a shop. Now it's a hole where they're building those hotels in town, But and I remember him taking me in. That was when Friday night shopping was on. I don't know when that would have been.
Where did you keep a pony in Erskineville?
Well, what happened was the first time the pony was brought home, I took it up the back lane, up this little back passage, and was out in the backyard, and it pulled over the trellis. You know, because we were waiting to find somewhere to put it. I had a shed there, never stayed there long, but down the bottom here, there was a, down on the railway, down in Burren Street, there were a set of stables there. The fellow used to drive horse and carts for some of the big companies, and so I took the pony down there and left it there. And I used to ride it around here, through the district or anywhere. I'd go to Centennial Park or ride through, I made heaps of trips. I went to Auburn once.
How old were you?
Oh, gee. I don't know, I must have been 8 or 9 or something like that. Yeah. I got a photo, I was pretty young with it too. I had it for a number of years.
Yeah. So you were allowed to roam a bit when you're on the horse?
Oh, only on the horse, yeah. I later, because of that experience, I went and rode for, I used to go down and work in, I can't think, up in Devine Street, a bloke's stables there. I used to ride his horses over to Victoria Park. I'm glad you put that light on. I found a broom I've been looking for. I didn't realise that was there.
And you used to ride somebody else's horses around here?
Yeah, down to the park mainly, or around the district. You know, the Erskineville Park was a very big park. Ran from Binning Street virtually right down to Fox Avenue. And that's a fair way, and it used to go down to Ashmore Street. So I could ride it there, and I rode it all around this area, or, you know, wherever I wanted.
That would have been pretty expensive for a working man to provide.
Yeah, well, my father was. The intention was, because I was so light and that, I was considered jockey material at the time. But I don't think I was too bloody bright anyway. I wasn't bright enough for them. And that stopped after a period of time, you know.
What happened with the horse?
The horse finally had to be taken away, and because it got pretty old, and was taken away.
When you talked about your father taking your sister Pat to the beach, did the whole family go there? Maureen. Did you ever go to the beach, or which beach did you go to?
When we got older, we used to go out to Bronte and sit in up on the hills there. And that time would have been, if you've got to remember now, would have been around about war years, because all that was all had barbed wire all along there. There was barbed wire entrenchments. You couldn't get easy access to the beaches. And then the steps were all had barbed wire and fortification stuff around it. But we used to go out Sundays, and we went to Bronte for years and years, I don't know how many years. Every Sunday, early in the piece, my father used to, which was really unusual, in our earlier days, we would get a taxi to Auburn to visit relations there. And later on in my life, we used to go out to Bronte by cab. And my father would take us out there, and we'd spend the time. You can imagine how many were climbing in those old cars. We used to have them all in the car.
The whole family?
And go out. Yeah, those that were going out. Sometimes you'd come back and pick up the rest. And, but we spent a lot of time out at Bronte. Later on in years, we went to Tamarama. And but during those years, as they start to grow up, my other sisters and brothers, they were in the younger sets. My father...
What is this younger set that you're talking
about? Well,
about?
it's a Catholic younger set.
Oh, right.
And they were down here at Erskineville, and they used to mix with the Newdown crowd, Newdown younger set. They had the debating societies up there. And what they did was that we'd all go out. The lot, everybody, locals and all, used to go out to Bronte and to the beaches, picnics, and mainly out to Bronte and that place. But other times, sometimes to Picton Gardens and any of those things, you know. A couple of other places, Vanilla. Or we'd go down to the the Royal, what is the main gardens up there at Sutherland. What are they?
Sutherland?
Yeah, Sutherland.
Do you mean the Royal National Park?
No, Royal National Park, yeah.
And that's with the younger set, is it?
Yeah, younger set, or sometimes we'd go on our own, you know.
With your dad, your family?
I'm sorry?
With your father, with your family?
Oh yeah, with all family, always the family, and we had no one else. It was, I mean, the family was here, and everyone else came here.
And did you mix a lot and socialise with your brothers and sisters when you were older? Like, when you were socialising, were your brothers and sisters part of the group?
They were all.
Yeah.
They were. We never had. We were our own group. We always.
And other people would come here.
Come here.
Was this a bit of a social centre?
Well, it would have been. Yeah, all the young blokes came here.
And your parents encouraged that?
Well, yeah, we had no problem. The place used to be packed. It was Sunday night. Yeah, my mother would be cooking for anything up to 20 people, 25 people, and she was an amazing person. I mean, we never supposedly had any, even when we were young. That's why I'd like to talk to my sister, because there was a bit of a difference. I could never ever understand, I never ever wanted for anything. Never wanted for a thing in my life. And I certainly never wanted for food. And as we got older, and they were then boys around about 15, 16, 17, 18, when they used to come here, my mother used to be able to sit down if we were out or had gone to the theatre or to the balls or that. They'd all come back here and sit here, or go out in the backyard. My mother would start cooking 1 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning, and sit there all night. Well, we'd talk all night, sitting there. Well, of course, that was pretty common. What you gonna see? I remember a bloke by the name of gee, I'm getting bad. But now, you know, they talk about people today. I can remember when, and I can't think of his name, he lived down in Ashmore Street. He worked for Brennan. He worked for gee, what a great matters, for something like 40-something years. Now, he used to go out to Daceyville, to the main dancing places. They would dance to 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. They'd have to start at 6 o'clock down here at Metters, where they made baths and all the porcelain stuff. They would go to work all day. They wouldn't come home, because also during the war they'd be working tremendous overtime. They would work till they stopped, come home, get a shower, and then go back and dance all night. And they had tremendous, you know, entertainment at that time. But I think you'd get a better look at that when if you ever talk to my sister. The other thing were the pubs. They were the centres, mainly the pubs here, and there were so many. The next place next door was Hardigan's pub, run by the first woman proprietor in New South Wales, Moya Hardigan. And her brother owned the pub at one stage, and then she took it over, Tommy Hardigan. He used to run that and also have a starting price bookmaking thing. And at one time, my father's brothers, there were 4 of them. There were 3 boys and a girl, Nell. Nell ran the starting price in George Street. Phil ran the one down here in Charles Street. My father ran the one here. And he had a Henry, used to run the one at Auburn. So at one stage there were 4 starting price operators. And they had a cousin who was a policeman. He turned out a Crown Sergeant. And the greatest upset of his life was when he was put here in charge for a while. because there was always fights and arguments and everything. And the pubs of a Saturday, most of the pubs, blokes would go there for drinking. But at some part of the afternoon, fellas like Tommy Rowley and Phil Murphy, who was an uncle of mine, one of my uncles, my father's brother, and they weren't, I suppose they were wild, but they used to go to the pubs, and the groups used to visit each pub, certain fellas, to have a fight, and you could see all the palings. Some of the places used to have palings. All the palings would be off everybody's fences, because when the fight starts, everything was grabbed. And then when the police come, they used to run inside. I can always, he's the last surviving person, Kevin Humphreys, but his mother was a terrific lady, another in the same mould. You know, they may not have been perfect people, but they were strong. They were unbelievable strong. And what happened was, that's in temperament and authority. And maybe I shouldn't be telling you this, but it is interesting in the sense that when the police had come, you'd see them all run onto the veranda, because the theory was that, and it was the law, the copper couldn't arrest you on your own property unless he had a warrant. See? Well, that was the theory. But of course then the coppers had come down, and then they would grab Big Jack, and they'd grab him, pull him off the veranda and tell him, we'd all be saying, you know, you can't do that. Well, the coppers didn't care. I mean, they were worse than the Crims, they were. So you ended up getting arrested with no good pleading. And if you're in the house, they'd go in and just grab you. They didn't worry about habeas corpus or the bloody right, the legal right. And but what was funny, the blokes that were fighting, and had been fighting, you know, each other, would be on the same veranda or in the house, all, you know, waiting to protect themselves from the coppers coming in. And they then would come out and abuse the coppers to such a degree that if you looked, you'd think, oh, well, you know, they're fighting those people. Earlier they were fighting each other, you know. Anyway, that's the way it is. The other remarkable thing is, when I was an alderman 10, 15 years ago, they used to say there were 80,000 people coming to South Sydney a day to service the industrial area. And that's 80,000 people. That was coming in, besides the population that was here. And naturally the population over the last 20 years has fallen dramatically. And as people improved themselves, particularly they all moved out. They moved out to better places. Most of them, a lot of them went up to Wyong or somewhere else, but they used to travel back, Wyong, and they moved out mainly. But the amazing thing was when Macdonaldtown Station, which is at the bottom here, I can remember when I was riding my pony and that, I was stationed down there. Of a morning from 6 o'clock, you would just see one stream of people, and they would be coming off the trains, firstly going up to the hospital and to the factories up this end, or down through Burren Street, down past the school, the public school, over the bridge at the railway, down over Erskineville Park, where you might see Noble Reserve now. They used to walk across there. There would be thousands going to Metters of a morning to start work, and then of an evening they'd all start coming back this way.
That's in the 40s, is it?
Yeah, this was in the 40s. Yeah, 40s up to, I don't know how long. But it was an amazing mass of people coming down there of a morning, you could see. And there were plenty of buses. I mean, we had the bus always travelled through here. After they took the trams out, the trams used to go along here. They used to go down Burren Street. I don't know whether they did go to Burren Street, but they used to be up outside opposite the railway, where the terminal was. And they'd turn around there, come back this way, come down the bottom to Burren Street, up into Wilson, and down Golden Grove Street and into Abercrombie, right into the city. And that was the trams. And it was a pretty big, they were always pretty well packed. And of course the kids used to always scale the trams. But I don't know when they really went, but the last time that they were there, they were, if you go out the front, it's built, it's all concreted. And I think that would have had to be done around about 1940, might have been 1950 or something, where they put those, you know, concrete in.
Getting back to the times, you know, was that in the 30s and 40s when there were the fights and there was a pub next door?
Well, no, that was later on. That was back round about from 27, and that didn't close till well after 1940.
Right, so you can remember, you grew up really next door to a pub?
Hmm?
You grew up next door
to a
pub?
Yeah. We spent all our life here.
And you can remember watching those sort of fights and police coming and
I can remember the Sly Grog. Maya Hardigan, they used to sell them the beer, and I know they did too. They sold them the beer, and they had a little shed, which was only a tin shed there on the property. That land actually belonged to the railway to get access to the railway line, and they used that last when the 3 or 4 Americans got killed on this railway line during the war. They got off the train and they all got skittled. I think there were 3 of them killed on the railway line at the back. Because at the back here, and that was the other thing, during the war, the troop trains used to come through here. And everybody around here used to make cakes and stuff like that, and they'd always be running over to meet the trains which used to stop there. And they would take the letters off the blokes and do things and give them things, you know, because they were all going to the war. They were going for embarkation or embarkation into town, or they were going out, whichever way. And I don't know why I switched to that, but to get back to the other place, Sly Grog was a big thing because hotels weren't open on Sundays and that. And what would happen is that they'd sell them the beer, and then when they got a bit cantankerous, they used to call the coppers. Well, she knew the copper was her boyfriend at one stage. And Jack, I can't think of his name now. So they used to call him, and they'd lumber everybody. Used to send my mother up the wall, because she never drank, but she used to think it was so unfair that these men had bought their liquor and everything, and then when they become a problem, they were all, she used to say, now they're going home to worry their wives. All right there. But Moya used to get rid of them. And she later left there, closed it down. That was the last. The licensee was transferred elsewhere, somewhere.
Now, did your father run SP booking from here when you were a kid?
Yeah. And what you do is, there was always, we were runners. I was a runner. I was a starting price runner, street runner.
And what did you do?
Well, I used to visit the houses and collect the bets, and then come back to the main place and you know, and I'd deliver the bets, and I'd go in between every race. I had to make sure that I was back in time, so I had the money in, and my father knew, you know. My auntie used to run her one too, but I worked between 2 areas.
Did you have any problem with the police?
Well, no, you never had any problem with the police, because see, the police were absolutely kings. They were, well, you didn't have any problem because they'd soon fix your problem. And what happened was, it was like when they arrested me. They arrested me for street betting, and I was only, I could have got out of it. There's no problem getting out of it. But when they arrested me for street betting, they arrested me in Charles Street. Now, my mother, all my father's people, all the local blokes, all paid off. You all paid the coppers.
Right.
And I didn't pay because I was only a kid and I'm running around. And, you know.
How old were you when you got arrested?
Oh, no, it might have been 13, 14 or something like that.
And it was street?
Oh, no, I had to be older than that. I had to be a bit older than that. I can't remember. But I had to be older because I would have been, I think I would have had to be 15 or 16. I could have got out of the thing. But what annoyed me was that there were a lot of places where the coppers used to get paid. And they got paid too. There was no operation in these areas that didn't operate. And what used to happen, my auntie used to have in her place, I can still remember, she used to have a bowl bigger than that, it was deep. And what she used to do, she used to fill it up, which was to us kids, miraculous, full of 20, it wasn't 20 cents, it was
2 bob?
2 bobs. And she'd fill the whole thing up. And what would always happen is she would get raided. When they got raided, she used to always be worried because what the coppers would do is they'd come in and they'd grab them and put them in their pockets, you know. And then you still had to pay to get off the bloody thing anyway, because you had to either send someone to stand up for you, like to go into to face the court. Sometimes you knew early enough to be able to send someone else. And blokes were desperate for money, you know, so they'd get $5 or £2 or something just for the privilege of being convicted. But if you knew, well, like, because most people paid the coppers off, they knew when they were going to raid.
So you could have somebody stand in.
That's right. And they were policemen. I mean, I remember Tommy Hardigan, they talk about harassment. Tommy Hardigan, the police used to ride a bike. And he had a blue with the owner of the hotel, and the coppers got it in for him. And for months and months they used to walk him right out to the back of Rosebery. He used to sometimes push their bikes for them while they walked, but they'd take him all the way up there and back again and get stuck into him.
Build him up?
Hmm? Oh yeah, we got bloody what's the name, you know. And they always say, but I mean, you never had any trouble with coppers. I mean, God, who would have a problem with coppers? I mean, anyone was mad. Wish you could lose. I know I shouldn't say it, but you could lose your life. Why wouldn't you lose your life?
So you're always careful of them?
Well, on me, I was bloody careful. I don't go, with all my supposed clout, I wouldn't go in a police station today. And I don't know, they say they've improved, have they? Good luck to them. But anyway, that's
you really could lose your life. It wasn't just a bit of a thumping if you...
Well, I mean, whoever worked out what happened? They weren't nice. I mean, they chucked you in the wagon and you got in. I mean, I shouldn't have got onto the subject, but they were bloody unbelievable. And that's why I get a bit cranky with people that say, oh, it was big with Long Tack Sam, kick you up the backside. Yeah, that was all right for Long Tack Sam when he co-opted a couple of kids, and they did. You never walked up the street, because if those coppers come along and found you out of time, they would do that. But what about the coppers that used to grab the blokes in the hotel and give them a bloody lacing? And I don't know how many people would have bloody well ended up with something serious from that. And I still hear people say, oh, in those days they kicked, yeah. My brother got kicked up the backside. He came home and told me father, and he said, well, right, you won't be there next week, will you? But that was all right for him. But there were a lot of, the police was supreme. They talk about the powers of the police. And I mean, what happened was, you could get off things. I mean, I had two choices. I could have, I don't know what it was. I had two choices. I could have paid the coppers off one way to prevent going to jail, like to the court. Or I could have used politics. I mean, all I had to do was ring the federal state member, or federal member, or state member mainly, and I wouldn't have had a problem. But because I was pig-headed, because I didn't want to do it, I went to court. I took the fine. And because I had money on me, I would have been probably 30 bob or 40 bob or something. Wouldn't have been a lot of money. It was a lot of money then. It would have been pounds, because I just collected all what I did. I didn't mean this conversation to go this way, but when the coppers picked you up, they'd taken the money and they used to put it in, and in theory you used to be able to collect it after the event, see? And so I accepted the responsibility, and I always remember I went up and I said, my father said, or my mother said to me, you can do it easy, you can pay the coppers, or you can use your influence. And I was being big time, shooting my mouth off. No, I'm going up, I'm going to get, what's the name there, I'm not going to do, all you people can pay, I'm not going to do it, you know. And so I go up, and my mother came up with me, and she said, this is great, having a son being convicted for starting price. Absolute disgrace. And I always had a feeling the problem was I got caught. So, but anyway, I remember getting the fine or whatever it was, and as I walked out, I said, I want me money. I went down to the claims office, and I always remember the big sergeant was sitting there, and I said, I want the money they took off me, mate. And I won't tell you what he said. He said, buzz off, but he wasn't that polite. You go. And I always remember walking back to my mother and saying, hey, I'm gonna, she said, don't get learn, you've already gone through it. Shut up and walk away. So they always got the money. They kept the money. Anyway, I didn't mean to tell you about that. But there were rough times, I suppose, but I never seen them mainly. At the top of Mitchell Road, all the big brick pits were. And that was an indication, other people will tell you about that. All the brick pits were there, and all the doomies, all the drinkers, and there were lots of them, heaps of them, used to go up and sleep in the brick pits near the kilns. And it wasn't unusual for Monday morning to come for them to find 2 or 3 or 1 or whatever it was dead, because they would get in with the drink, the state they were in drinking. A lot of them were metho drinkers too and that. And they'd get in, and for the heat around the thing, they would suffocate or whatever it was, because they'd be right up against the heat. And they were, those brick pits were there for, I don't know, well, they've only just started to fill some of them in. I mean, Sydney Park's an example of that. That was one of them.
Was that in the 30s and the 40s?
No, that would have been after the 40s.
After the 40s?
Oh, yeah.
People were sleeping in there?
Oh, yeah, sleeping there right up. I remember that Jock used to sleep there. He spent his life. He was a bloke, would have been 50 or 60 when I knew him. But he would have spent well, that's where he spent his time.
They slept near the kilns?
Hmm?
They slept near the kilns?
Yeah, like when they used to fire the bricks and that. But we had the old steam trains that used to go through here. The place was always had soot, full of soot, you know, from the trains. They used to travel pretty extensively through here, and we've seen the changes over to the other engine train, you know, diesel and that. But it wasn't a bad area. Even now, I'm just thinking, they had a lot of facilities around here. I mean, when you come to look at the shops, where I'm sitting now, There was a shop on the corner, there was a shop on the other corner, there was a shop at the back. That's 4 shops that if you went up the road, you had all those shops on this side where there's a park now. They've all been pulled down. Tremendous amounts of shops.
And people shopped locally? People shopped
Well, that's all they did, because all you had to do was go there. And almost, I would say, most people, there was a shop up on the corner here. So, and there were, as I said, there's 3 here in this corner. There was 2, there was one halfway down Burren Street in a house. So you could see the demand for a shop. It was actually in a house, you know. And I've lost track, love.
Okay, I might ask you another question. You mentioned some Americans getting killed on the
during
railway.
the war.
Yeah. What happened then?
Well, what happened was they got off the train, off the trains. They used to see that everything used to go through there, from, you know, wherever they were carrying troops and that. But they were on the electric train thing. And what they had done, they'd got off because they got lost somewhere. And the bloke next door, Rogers, he was the ganger, the chief ganger for the area from here back to, I think, Redfern. And it was his job. They carried them through, there's a back, not there now, a wall. They carried them back through his place. He was the ganger that had to go out. And, you know, with his group, with his team of blokes, to pick them up and bring them through here. But that was through the war. And it was, well, we see thousands go. I wouldn't know how many, because they were all on those trains.
So,
and Americans too, like troops.
Troops.
Yeah.
How did the war affect your family?
Oh, well, see, my father, he was working because it was considered an essential industry he was in. That was in the newspaper.
Oh, yeah.
See? And they had air raid shelters around. They built next door in the vacant block. They dug out their air raid shelter. There were air raid shelters around here. There's one up there still existing. In fact, I might show you. It's one of the sad things. Yeah, I shouldn't put it on record, but it is an air raid shelter. I've still got a lot of stuff in it. A lot of records that just deteriorate. That's the problem, you know. But we had air raid shelters, and on the night when the subs were in the harbour, in the Sydney harbour, when they were firing, I was at the Majestic Theatre, which was the old Majestic. Do you remember that place? Well, it was at the top of Wilson Street, Wilson and Erskineville Road. It was a very, very great theatre. It was built...
oh, sorry. Okay. What were we talking about?
I can't remember either.
You were just saying then about was there much difference? You know, how you were located, and you hung around Erskineville, and your friends were from Erskineville, and you went to school in Erskineville. What was the difference between the neighbourhoods? Was there any sort of social status difference, say, between Alexandria or Redfern or Erskineville? Or?
No, there were what they called there were areas. What's another word for it? There was an area business. There was if you came from Alexandria, you were pretty proud that you were Alexandria and Erskineville, and we used to fight down at the bottom of the street. There was a railway piece of land, a construction thing for a gang, and they used to have blue metal. And the blokes on this side, all the young blokes, they'd be 10, 15. Well, they wouldn't have been 15, but they might have been about that age. So we had full armies put together by the youth, and my brothers were all in it. They had actual, you know, what do they call them?
Shields.
Shields, and cut the swords, and they used to have stuff to carry the heavy metal, the blue metal, for throwing, and we used to go between this area up into Newtown, which is Watkin Street and the top part of Burren Street.
And so the local kids,
yeah, well, they formed themselves into that. But you talk about gangs, and my understanding was that they were only just fights. There weren't the viciousness that was there, even though it sounds like you were throwing blue metal, which is pretty lethal if it hits you. But we survived all that, and you used to run, because that was like a dividing line, that railway. We used to go over the railway line, and besides the guards always chasing you, or the station master, it was like a fortress, going across, even right along here. And there used to be a tunnel. If you go there now, just around where the hotel was, you'll see that they've got a flower thing, but the tunnel used to go through there, and that was part of the area that you used to fight between, in the tunnel.
And those fights were they more sort of organised, good fun, and a bit of rivalry?
It's an amazing thing. They were really serious. They were really businesses. But I often wonder, we didn't do any damage. We couldn't have done too much damage. It's not like today when you see these gang wars, where kids are running around stabbing and things like that. Yet a piece of blue metal is a very dangerous thing if you throw it and get hit. We used to get hit. But I mean, it was all over.
And how many kids would be on each side?
I can tell you, I can recall now, and I'm not doing it too good, but I can remember at least 20 or 30 kids all over. And when I say kids, they had to be 10 or 12. And that, I know my brother was he was one of the captains, and I was always left out of every bloody thing, and I was always trying to follow up, and I always liked to be a bit safe too, so I never ever liked to get hurt. That's why I can't remember too much, getting hurt too much. But
would this have been in the 40s?
Oh yeah, it had to be, because I would have had to be, from then on, 1938, I would have had to be. And, but I don't know, it's a shame that things weren't kept, or you didn't keep, your memories, or you didn't record something. I'm a single bloke, but if I was anyone today, I'd ask them to make all the notes they can, because it's important, the history.
And your mum mustn't have known about these things, because you were saying...
She knew about it, but like all mothers, they were, we all raced down there. She knew we were there. You'd get into trouble, you shouldn't be doing this and you shouldn't be doing that. My mother spent her life here. I used to think my mother was odd or queer or something, in the sense that, mothers are mobile now, they go everywhere. My mother spent her life here, and very rarely did we go visiting anyone. My mother used to say, there's too many of you to feed to take anywhere, and so you never apply, never go. And that's why whenever we went anywhere, my father always insisted of my mother that we take things. If you went anywhere, and I go to places down, people say to me, oh, you shouldn't do that, and I think to myself, no, I do it. Because that's, when you went with a family, you were going to visit people that, maybe didn't know. Well, yeah, I never asked, you never asked, you just took. You know what I mean? Mm. But no, my mother, we had that, seemed to have had that latitude through there. And my uncles were pretty wild blokes. They all went to the war. Pat died of gas. My brother, that was in the First World War. He came home and died later on, before the Second World War. Phil, who was a very heavy drinker, a single bloke, and he lived down in George Street in a house that actually faced the railway. It was the only house that faced the railway, the railway itself. All the others face out onto, that's how long ago it was there. And his mother as I said, used to go to church every Sunday, or every morning. Every morning she went to church. But he was a pretty wild bloke. He went to the... yeah. But he went overseas and they sent him back because there was a blue over there and he killed an Egyptian in a fight. But he was a great fighter. And he had a great mate, Tommy Rowley. Tommy Rowley lived down in Burren Street. And they were tremendous mates and they stuck together and everything. But then every Saturday afternoon, they would, up there on the Rose of Australia, which is a place up the top here, they would be drinking. They would fight everybody, and everyone would fight. They would come here, they'd come in groups to fight. And then, even up the road. And then my uncle would start fighting Tommy Rowley, his best friend, and they'd fight every Saturday. And his mother used to be coming up to go to church, you know, or to confession, and everything had to be tidied up and cleaned away so that his mother wouldn't see him fighting or the results of the fight and stuff like that. But they were really good, you know, they were good people, you know. I'm trying to think of the fellow that built that church, because that church there and the convent opposite, that's Erskineville Catholic convent for the nuns. The convent originally was down in George Street. It's a big old place. I don't know what this history will entail about that, but they moved out of there.
What were your school days like? What were the nuns like?
They were very, very strict, to me, because I was hopeless at school. I think the nuns were tremendous influences, and for people, my sisters would talk highly. I mean, you had the odd nun that may have been severe and that, but I mean, you know, they were tough days, and they were pretty decent type of people, and school wasn't a happy time for me. I wasn't rapt about school, and I was virtually. I think I went to Lewis and Brothers eventually, and they sent me back to do another year. Doesn't sound too bloody good, but I came back to do another year or something, and then I went back to Lewisham. And but the nuns were good. But I mean, you'll hear stories of how tough they were, but they were very, very generous in lots of ways, and a lot of the Sister Agnes and all those things, they left a lot of good feelings, I think. And the old parish priest, Dr. Toomey, he was here. He was an old Irish priest and very renowned. He was one of the through the Depression, and my sister and them might tell you about him. But he was one of the really remarkable priests, a remarkable man, and he would fight. He was very political, and I think he even had an altercation with somebody in the park because the fellow made some reflections of the Catholic Church. I remember it was the fact that the bloke said, "I'll give you a hiding, only you've got that collar on," and Dr. Toomey said, "Well, that's no bloody problem. Pull the collar off and give him a lesson." And he was that type of a bloke, but a good bloke, honoured and revered in these areas. And
why was he honoured and revered?
Because someone once walked in and closed the door on his presbytery, and it was during the Depression. And I remember my grandmother told me he went and pulled the door open. He said, "That door stays open," and it used to always be open.
And he would...
Anybody can come here anytime. They were pretty good people.
They feed people?
Oh, he'd feed, yeah. He was a terrific bloke. Mm. But I mean, I was a young person, and when you heard of those people, they were really something, you know.
Were your parents politically involved?
No, my grandma, see, this is a story, it's making me laugh about these women at the ALP State Conference. And I hear about women getting a break. My grandmother was one of the founding members, so I'm told, I got no records, of the ALP in Erskineville. And that was it, and I never knew them to be politically active or anything by the time I came along, because she died when she was 80 something, I think. And my father was always Labor, and I can still remember around here the bloke next door was a communist, and you had to admire him because they weren't thought a lot of. And he was the last person I seen stand on a soapbox, and it was over here in Charles Street at the top here, outside number 11, Charles Street. He was on that. He made a speech, a political speech for an election, and my father was always Catholic. My mother took part in the Catholic Action, and it was the time when that scurrilous paper, I can't think of it now, but it was a fella. He was a millionaire, or he was one of the wealthy blokes. He was anti-Catholic, and he was always running articles, and there was some talk about problems at Lewisham Hospital, and I always remember my father never liked the show because it was a Catholic Action group. I forget what they are. Gee, I wish my sister was here. But anyway, she involved herself because it was for Catholics and the improvement. And even the church didn't look on all these groups good. Like some of the local priests didn't like them because they were all full of old Irishmen. I mean, old Hogan had come from Ireland. He was one of the... He'd been sent out from Ireland or escaped from Ireland because of his political activities and came here. But they were real Catholics. Every morning they'd go to Mass morning and night, and they were tremendous Catholics. And my mother got herself involved as a part of the younger set through that. And my father never believed it. There used to always be an argument about her involvement, you know. And we used to be treated to some kind of myth, like mirth, about they're defending the hospital or something like that, and they did one night.
Lewisham Hospital was Catholic, wasn't it?
Yeah, she was Catholic. But I can't think of the bloke. I should have thought of his name. But he was really anti-Catholic, and there was a problem one time. They were going to raid the Lewisham Hospital at them because they had all the nuns there. Yeah. I hope I get a review of some of this bloody thing, and I'll have to go back and get names for it. Yeah. But you know, in this area, it's the other thing too. You know, in this area, they talk about migration. We've seen the migration. This is migration since the war. That wasn't the first migration. We've had Little Lebanon Town. We've had, if you just go, and it's out of my area, but I remember them, if you just go over the other side of Botany Road, all that area there, they were places that the Housing Commission still got photographs of, and that's what you ought to look at. When you go there, they were the slums, and they were the slums. Houses were built virtually with cardboard as wall. If the wall disappeared, they'd have cardboard or butter boxes. You know, the timber from the butter boxes. Now, they were all in those areas. We had all the mix. In this area, it was mainly English. In this Erskineville, Alexandria, there was no mix. But as you got further up...
Is that towards Redfern?
Yeah, well, anywhere up Raglan Street, Wellington Street, towards Elizabeth Street, and going back to Pitt Street. That was all that area. And we had the Chinese gardeners here. We had Chinese people there. If you go down to Wyndham Street, Alexandria, there's a Joss house. We call it the Joss house. It's a big one. It's still there now. You can
it's
go
a temple.
Sort
of temple.
Yeah, have you seen it?
Yeah.
Yeah, but if you go around into I think it's East Street. You can walk right in. Have you been in there? Well, you ought to go and have a look. I think they've got Asians there now, but it was empty for years and years.
What years are you talking about with the Lebanese migration?
Oh, well, they would have been there. They would have been around the 1938s, and all those areas were full.
When you were a child, yeah.
Yeah, but I know of them. I didn't have any history of them. I didn't see. We never moved out of the areas. I mean, to go to Redford was a long way. I can still remember we went to the Chinese gardens, which were down along the canal at Alexandria. You know where down Burren Street. All the Chinese had their gardens there. And I remember being on this side, swimming across. I didn't swim across. I was lucky enough to get piggybacked across with somebody. They used to raid the gardens. And they used to have what they call guns that fire like...
slug guns?
Pellets. No, not shotguns.
Slug?
Saltpeter.
Oh, right.
They used to have them to ward off people raiding the kids raiding the gardens, the young blokes going across. So, I mean, really, even in this area, I mean, the brick pits, for instance, the brick pits were still in our time. They've survived. And we had, this was known here, Alexandria there, was known as the Birmingham of Australia. There is a book on it somewhere, I don't know whether you've seen it, yeah. And I think they described a lot of that. I've got one somewhere, I don't know where it is, or I did have it.
Were your family mostly mixing with Catholics? Was there much of a Catholic-Protestant divide?
Yeah, you knew there was a difference. And there was a real thing. I mean, I remember we were all Catholics and we knocked around with Catholics. I suppose we must have had some Protestants that there were, but mainly all our life was spent among our own group here. And I mean, we went to church and, I don't know, we went to church. There wasn't a lot of mix because, as I said, this family here, we provided all our own entertainment. We were big enough, and with the other kids coming in, we virtually spent all our life around here, and you knew there was a division in churches. I mean, there were Protestants and that, and there was some, they were bloody bigoted, the Catholics. They were really a bigoted pack of bludgers. I mean, you couldn't go to some people's funeral, and you didn't go, and you certainly didn't go to their weddings. And blokes that were good mates, I remember my brother was asked to go and be best man. And he had a good mate. He wasn't allowed to do that, you know. Oh no, they were bigoted, but when you come to think of it and go back, there was a reason for it. I mean, they fought hard for what they believed in, and they didn't have a lot to do. I mean, today you've got so many things to distract you. You shouldn't have an evil thought in your mind for people, should you? No, but you should. But in those days, what did they have? All they had was work and to come home. And they never had money and they never had things to watch or do. We used to, like some nights over here, some of the men would come down and sit on the corner and talk. And all the kids would be allowed to run up and down the street. I mean, my brothers used to play cricket here and football on that main road, which is, you wouldn't have wanted to do it any time, but in those days you could do it. And it was a good area, and people, there were lots of facilities too. I mean, shopping-wise, there were heaps of bakeries. Robles up here would have had anything up to 30 or 40 carts. And I can still remember, I know it's all over the bloody place, I can remember my father's uncle, my mother's uncle, driving a horse and dray from the city. And he used to go past here around about 6 o'clock with the light on the back, and he'd drive up here and go around Septimus Street, and then he would go down, and he used to have his down in Union Street, and he used to stable his horses there. Now, you know, horse and drays were pretty common.
Like in the 30s?
After the 30s, yeah, from the 30s on, there was still horses and drays. The last horse and dray I know was run by Horace Stubbs down in, he lived in Sutter Street later in life, but he stabled his horses down on the Monk's estate in Park Street, Erskineville. And when you start talking to Cliffy Noble and those blokes, if you do talk to them, Cliffy gave a history lesson the other night at the Labour League meeting. But when you start talking to him, you would pick up a hell of a lot. And the other thing too is that these, at the bottom here, if you walk out now, you just see open area down the bottom. But they had the cleansing sheds for the railways. They just covered acres. They were just, that was all covered. If you went up on the railway, up on the platform at Macdonaldtown, you would see the top of the roof. That's how high they were. You go and have a look at that wall. That has to be 20 or 30 feet high. And these, they were just huge sheds where heaps of women and men used to clean the carriages for the city before they moved them out. And they had a gasometer down there. You can still see the gasometers that used to be used in the rail yard there. And Everleigh, I don't know how many people that would have employed. Well, you can see parts of Everleigh now. And no, it was a really interesting area in lots of ways, and it did have history. I think one of the Union Street, Erskineville, was where one of the rental strikes were put on back in the 1930s.
Yeah.
You might have remembered that one. That was down. That house is still standing in Union Street. Yeah. Well, I don't know what else I could tell you.
Were times more dangerous?
No, well, I could tell you now, even up till a few years ago, when I become an alderman, now that was, say 5 years, that's 25 years, about 22 years back, I never had any problem. I used to be able to walk out of this place, and as an alderman I represented the what they call the West Ward, here the South Ward, which took me right out to Alexandria, out to Beaconsfield. I would leave here of a night time at 1 o'clock and walk right through all the streets and just have a look. And I used to walk along Botany Road and up into Lawson Street, and I'd go through Everleigh Street, Caroline, Hugo and Abercrombie, down over Edward Street, round the back there, come up Shepherd Street and walk right up past the Golden Grove Church, which was St Kieran's, not that, the one they've got there now. And I never felt any fear or worry. And I was able to do that. I went through when they started with the Aboriginals in what's the name, and it's a pet hate of mine anyway. They claimed the Aboriginals were there. That's a bloody lie. The Aboriginals were never there enforced like they are now. They were imported into that area, boarding. There were some Aboriginal families. And they were the Hills, but you wouldn't have known. You went down and knocked on Mrs. Hills. I remember 106 Everleigh Street. You'd go in there. There were more Aboriginal children. She was a white lady and an English lady, or English, whatever she was. I never even knew the difference. I just always thought people were the same. And you'd walk in there. She had grandchildren. They were all intermarried. But she was one of the few families. Her and Mumblers, there might have been a couple of others. They were just a few people there. They lived with everybody. And they talk about integration of Aboriginal. You watch here now, I know this is getting a bit bloody solid, but you watch here and watch now people walk around here and see the Aboriginal children and kids stick together. Go down there, you never seen that once. You never seen Aboriginals and like that. Though I never ever, I never knew the word black. They talk about being racist. I never knew the word black till I went to Edward Street in the settlement there, and that lousy Bob Dallaire, who's now a QC for the Aboriginals, turned around and said, "Us blacks." I nearly fell over because I could remember once referring to an Aboriginal family over here, top family. And I remember one of the kids said something and he got such a bloody belting because he referred to an Aboriginal. I got carried away with that. You'll have to cut that out.
Because he referred to them as being black in a derogatory way.
That's the first time I'd ever heard it.
So they're much more integrated and just...
Oh, integrated. There was no problem. There was no problem because I'll tell you this. Those people, and this is what I love to tell them, they talk about integration. Go and have a look at the clubs. Go in and have a look at the honour rolls up in the club. Go and have a look at the honour rolls around here and have a look at the Aboriginal families that lived here. There weren't heaps of them. There's only supposed to be, I've heard them say 20,000 at one stage here, and I knew that was a joke. And I've looked at the figures recently and they said, 1,500 is around this area. Well, I can tell you, there wasn't a hell of a lot of them around. But who were around, they were great people. Because they were all in the football clubs, they were working in the councils, they were on the road gangs, they were in the clubs. And when you walk in there today and I look up, I can see names of all those people. When it became profitable to be discriminatory, they promoted, and that's the Aboriginal groups. And that's not the poor, the ordinary people. That were the Kay Blairs, the Bobby Blairs and all those buggers who raced around, got themselves an education, and not a true education, never put the time and effort in, were virtually given the bloody honours, the whatever it is to be...
the degree?
Yeah. And that applies to Blair. He's the one now that's advising on Marbo or something. Every time I see him, I always say, "Oh, you're going bastard," because he really drives me up the wall. I hope that goes in.
Yeah.
But no, and people, I never knew of it. I mean, everyone was poor, everyone was broke, and I'm not saying I was. I mean, I was. My father and that protected me pretty well. I was born at a pretty good time. And I would love you to talk to my sister.
Yeah.
Because my sister may have a different view.
Yeah. Okay, well look, thanks very much. It's been great. Okay,
Good.
Thank you.
Right, I love.
That was a shop?
Yeah. And that used to be a tunnel where people would walk up there and where we used to defend between the two areas, the borderline.
That's Newtown.
That's Newtown. You walk through there into Copeland Avenue there.
You have your big wars.
That was a shop there, and that was the last shop that kept going. To play violin. It was very religious bloke. She was
Irish?
Irish, and a very generous man. We could always remember. All the kids remembered him very generous. I can't even think of his name now. He was an Irish bloke. Of course, that was nearly all right. We used to be bars. That's when I become an orphan.
That car?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Can remember it properly. She poisoned a number of babies over the years, and it has appeared in one of those historical units, like in the Daily Mirror.
In this house, so she lived
Yeah,
there.
this one here, number 27. I used to, this is the only one I have. Read this here, this is the one I wanted to have a look at. That's an ordinary house.
It's like a one in Granville.
And that used to be a shop. It had the front on it. It was like that. And the woman conducted. What I'm trying to get at, that's how many shops you had. Not only did they create them, but they even converted a house to one, because that was the demand. So you never had to go far to go shopping. You know what I mean? Just down there, to drive through there, and up on the back there was an old shed, and that's where I used to keep my horse there. And the old bloke that I used to rent that off, he was driving horse and drays, and the horse and drays, and also he used to have a carriage. And his name was Ted. I can't think of his second name now.
Was he a haulage, like a carrier?
Yeah, well, a haulage, but he also did the carriage trade too, you know. But I wanted you to see this place because there are other places that have got that type of, that's how many shops you have. And,
Yep.
you right?
Yep.
So, you were talking about the people.
Yeah, I was saying along from the station there, down up to Erskineville, and down into Methers, down into Alexandria, there would be at least, there had to be, the whole street would be full, or the footpaths would be full from about 7 o'clock on till about 8 o'clock. And there had to be thousands on their way down there. And as I said, even 10 years ago, there were 80,000 people coming into the area. At that time, there had to be well over 120,000 people coming into these areas to supply or look after the Black 56, Swanson Street, Erskineville. What's that?
Say something about the pub and the
Well,
place.
the pub was run mainly by the Hardigan family. There was Tommy Hardigan and his sister Moya, and Tommy ran it for quite a number of years, and then they arranged for Moya to become the first woman publican in New South Wales. I'm pretty sure that was and she ran it for a number of years and then closed it. It was then turned into a boarding house, and then the housing housing commission took it over and gave it to one of the church organisations to have for. You don't bloody well take the mansion here. That wasn't meant. I raced in to close the door, but then I realised it wasn't right.
What is it?
Air raid shop. And that's college candle factory at the back. He's moved out of it. When you cut the colour yeah, I think it will be a bit hard for you to. He said I'd get 175, but you know the old place on the other side there, that went for 156.